Hello and welcome once again to CSIT 208, Multimedia and Web Design. I am sure you enjoyed the previous session as you were able to have a practical view of HTML. We proceed to the introduction to CSS and JavaScript. And in this session, we are going to learn about cascading style sheets, CSS for short, and then JavaScript. And after completing this session, you should be able to describe cascading style sheets, discuss the use and importance of CSS, which is cascading style sheet, describe selectors and how they are used, describe how to put HTML and CSS together, describe some common CSS properties, and then we appreciate the basics of JavaScript, which is a scripting language as we mentioned in our previous slides. So we start with an introduction to CSS. So cascading style sheets. They are used to describe the presentation of documents. Example, defining layouts, sizes, colors, and what have you. HTML will deal with the content, and then CSS will help you design how it looks. So it helps improve content accessibility. Now it also helps us separate presentation from the content. Now, CSS can be applied to any XML documents, not just HTML and XHTML. And I'm sure we all remember what XHTML is, which is a combination of XML and HTML. So CSS can be applied to any XML document. It is not limited to just HTML and XHTML. And I'm sure you still remember what XHTML is, Extensible Hypertext Markup Language. Now, CSS can be applied to different styles for different media. Now we can have one for on-screen, for print, for handheld devices, for projection, and what have you. Now why cascading? This is because of the priority scheme it works with. Child elements inherit properties and styles from their parent elements. And they can override them, of course. They can have their own properties, overriding what their parents have given to them. And we can also enforce some rules by using the important rule. Some CSS styles are inherited and others are not. An example of the ones that are inherited, we have the color, font size, text align, list styles, and so on. Now, box-related and positioning styles are not inherited. The width, the height, the floating, the positioning, the padding are not inherited. And the anchor tag, which is the A tag, does not inherit color and text decoration. Now, style sheets consist of rules, selectors, declarations, properties, and values. The description here gives us a total understanding of how to use CSS. First of all, we specify the selector. In this case, is the body. Over here, they are used in three different ways, and when we get to that portion, we'll understand it better. We have the selector here, and from the opening of the curly braces to the end of the curly braces, we call it the declaration block. Now, inside the declarations, inside the declaration block, we have individual declarations separated by semicolons. So for this particular example, we are having a body selector, and the declaration block has two separate declarations. We have the color declaration and then the padding declaration. Now, each declaration is an ordered pair, which is property and corresponding value. So color, which is the property, and its corresponding value is black. Padding and its corresponding value is 1 Selectors are also separated by commas. Declarations are separated by semicolons, as we have seen in the above example. And properties and values are separated by colons, color, colon, black. So we can see here that we can have three selectors using the same declaration. So we have H1, H2, and H3. If you have watched the previous video, you will know that H1, H2, and H3 are the heading tags. And you can use the tags as selectors. And these commands will affect all these tags that have been stated in the selectors. Now, selectors determine which elements the rule applies to. So definitely from this part, we know that the rule of color green and the font weight of bold will apply to all H1, H2, and H3 tags on your web page. Now you can have your declarations affecting certain elements under other selectors. So for example, you can have all anchor tags under a header selector. Now there are two main types of headers of selectors. Sorry, there are three main types of selectors. We have the one based on class, based on attributes, and then the tag itself. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, we have three primary kinds of selectors. We have by tag, which is the type selector. We have by element class name. That's only for HTML. And then we have for classes as well. So for the by element, which is the one we precede with the pound sign, we have the class which we precede with a dot. So in this example, the last example where the cursor is showing, we see that this particular declaration applies to H1, all H1s, then every component or element with class link, and then every component with ID top link. Now we have pseudo classes that define state. Let's assume you have a cursor and you have moved it over a hyperlink. That can trigger a pseudo element which define paths and are used to generate content as well. So you want something specific to happen when a user passes the mouse over a link. You use the hover. So there's first line, there's before, there's after, and then there are so many. Now you can also match relative to element placement. So relative to element placement, you can have something like a P and an A. Then the P is the paragraph tag, the A is the anchor tag, and this affects them, the text, decoration, and the line. So we have the same. If you want all elements under the P tag to be affected by color black, you use this. And you can also have a type matching of siblings, where you can have all images with all links which are siblings. And the links here are going to be the classes of those siblings. Then we have the greater than selector property, which matches direct child nodes. So if you have a particular element being a child of another, you can use that to specify the declaration, what the declaration should affect. So P greater than dot error. Dot error is the class, and P is the tag for paragraph. So in a paragraph tag, any element with class error should be affected by font size 8 pixels. In the same way, you want a specific image to be affected. You use the box bracket and specify a unique attribute about that particular image before you specify your declaration. Now, if a particular element has more than one class and you want to refer to it, you can use the names of the classes without spaces. Example, .class1, .class2. This matches elements with both or all the classes applied to the same element at the same time. Now, values in CSS rule. Now, for example, if you're doing CSS with colors, you can apply hexadecimal or RGB, or predefined aliases such as black, blue, red, green, and so on. You can also have numeric values as specified in pixels, EMS, example 12 pixels, 1.4 EM. You can also have in points, inches, centimeters, and millimeters as defined in these examples, and also in percentages. Let's say you have a particular div tag and you want it to occupy 50% of your screen. Now, 0 as a value can be used without units. Now, browsers have different CSS rules. Now these rules are used when there is no CSS information or any other style information in the document. Now you have to take note that the default styles differ in different browsers. Therefore, programmers usually reset all these default values in their CSS files. Now we have to be able to link our HTML and our CSS. As we have seen, the CSS is used to do the presentation and make it look as we want it to look, and HTML deals with the content. Now we have to be able to link them, and there are three main ways by which we can link them: the inline, the embedded, and the external. The inline rules, you don't require selectors because you write the CSS inside an HTML attribute called style. The embedded, you write the selector with its declaration inside the head of the web page or the HTML page you have created. Or you can have finally an external CSS, which is a separate file, usually with the file extension .css, and it is linked to the web page via a particular tag known as the link, uses the rel equal to style sheet, and href will specify the path location of the CSS file you want to include. Using external files is highly recommended. That is the best way to handle CSS. Inline style. This is an example of an inline style. We have a paragraph, and the style over here helps us achieve the inline style. We have the font size to be 20 points and the color to be 0000FF. Now, if we remember the RGB, we learned R for red, G for green, B for blue. The hexadecimal counterpart, the first two zeros represent the red component, the next two zeros represent the green component, and the last two components represent the red component. This means that we are expecting color blue for even more text. And we can see that. So this is the display of the code that is written behind. Now when we want to embed styles inside the head tag, we use the style tag and then we give it a type to be equal to text/CSS. Now we can specify others for other types of includes. We can have text/HTML, we can have image/GIF, and many others, text/JavaScript if you want to include a script. Now when we embed it, we can see that inside the head, this is the opening of the head and this is the closing of the head, we are having a style tag that starts and ends here after our title tag, and we can define a selector and then the declaration. Selector, declaration, selector, declaration, selector, declaration. The first three selectors are tag selectors, so they are tag types, and then the last one, which is the .blue, is a class selector. And it will affect the content of that HTML page, and this is the output we are going to get. Now, external CSS styles. Now, as I mentioned, the best way to add CSS to your content, which is HTML, the presentation, which is CSS, you need to use external style sheets, which is highly recommended. Now, this is how you do it. You separate the pages, and then you allow the HTML page to call the CSS, and you do this by using the link rel equal to style sheets, type equal to CSS, text/CSS, and then the href is the path to the location of the CSS file, which has the extension .css. Now the link element should be in the head tag. Another way of using external CSS is to import CSS within another CSS. So over here we can see how we can import using the URL, and then we specify the location of the file, CSS file we want to include. Asian browsers do not recognize the @import. So this is an example of a content of a typical external CSS file. So over there you just define CSS, and then you use the link rel style sheet to join it back to your web page. So over here you can see that within the head we have link, type equal to text/CSS, rel equal to style sheet, and then the href will contain style.css. This tells us that the style.css file is found within the same location as this HTML page. Now we'll talk about some few CSS properties. These ones are text related. We have color, specifies the color of the text. Font size will specify the size of the font. Font family will specify the typeface. The font weight will specify whether it will be normal, bold, bolder, lighter, or you can even use values from between 100 and 900 to specify the weight of the font. Another set you can look at is border. You can give borders to your elements, and then you can specify the width of the border. You can have it to be thin, medium, thick. You can have a border color to be any of the colors defined with RGB or hexadecimal. You can have types of borders, which is the border style. It could be none, it could be hidden, it could be dotted, it could be dashed, it could be solid, it could be double. You can have so many different ones. Now we do a brief introduction to JavaScript. So JavaScript is used to add interactivity to the client side of your website and commonly referred to as JS. And JavaScript code is defined in the script tag. So this is an example of how you can define your JavaScript content. Now, uses of JavaScript. JavaScript can be used, as I said, to make your website interactive, to change things at runtime. One example is that you can change HTML content. So one very important function in JavaScript is get element by ID. So you have an element in your web page with ID demo. You can do documents.get elements by ID demo.inner HTML, and then you can put a value here like hello UG. So it will scout through your document object model, which is the DOM, and then it will look for the tag with ID demo, and then it will replace whatever content is there with hello UG. The same way you can change HTML attributes, like the way we had left alignment and right alignment to our TD. You can actually scout through your DOM, which is the document object model, look for a particular TD with demo ID, and then you change the alignment to the left by doing by doing documents.get elements by ID into brackets demo.align equal to left, and so on. You can also do a similar thing to change the font size by doing documents.get elements by ID.style.font size equal to the new font style you want. And then you can also even use it to hide elements by using the style.display equal to none on documents.get elements by ID. A simple example of JavaScript on your web page. This is actually going to bring a pop-up box, and it's going to find the sum of 5 and 6. Now, JavaScript functions. There are certain times you need to have some codes that will be reused over and over and over again. It is not expedient to write those codes every single time, but you can put them into functions so that you can easily call your function, and then it will do the computation that you want for you. So over here, we see how we call a function, and over here, we see how we declare a function. So we are declaring a function, my function, which takes two parameters, A and B, and it is going to return the product of A and B. So my function has been called over here, and you have supplied arguments 4 and 3. So what it's going to do is it's going to take 4 and 3, like A and B, multiply them, and give you the results. So 4 times 3 will be 12, and 12 will be stored inside var x. Thank you very much.